You can see these cabin filters have kind of seen better days.
What we have here, this is our original orifice tube right here, and then this is what it's supposed to look like even after the AC has been run.
This is all that was collected in the valley of the engine. So this is a mix of brake clean, oil, and muck. Hey everyone, welcome back to DC MotorWerks. My name is Cameron, and about 3 weeks ago or so, I joined my good friend Ed Bolian from Vinwiki to reacquire the Flood Gallardo from Car Trek 1. Be sure to check out his video up there. But this car has only moved 89 miles in 3 years. Before we drove it 900 miles to get back here to Georgia. But let's see how bad it could be after 3 years of barely moving. So here you can see the Gallardo is in, we'll just call it service position because we do have the engine compartment open. See, we got the AC machine hooked up. The car is looking a little road weathered and a little bit more than that. But if you watch Ed's video, you'll see that we drove this straight back from New Jersey, flew up there at like 5 o'clock in the morning and jumped in the car. But we were met by an early surprise of having to push start it multiple times because the battery was completely shot, even though it was only 5 or 6 months old, I think they said. But that made for an interesting trip, especially when we had to stop for gas and shut the car off because the fuel door does not open unless the engine is not running. Thankfully, the weather was pretty good, that we weren't in too dire need of the air conditioning, which was not working. As you can see, we do have that hooked up now. But once we got back to Georgia, first order of business was to get the Gallardo back in the shop, do a service because oil hadn't been changed in at least 3 years, and amongst other things that were not working, like speaker covers were hanging off of it. It had some terrible tint on the windows that was peeling and definitely needed to come off. But generally we made it and everything worked well. But once we got it in the shop up in the air, started looking at this a little more closely, we realized that there's a lot more remnants of this car's past with its flood that reared its ugly head, and just some other things that of course come to a surprise after a car has sit for a while. So 900 miles with 2 grown men in the cramped compartment of a Spider Gallardo was not ideal. Along the side of the car here, you can see that this car's history quickly reared its ugly head when we were addressing the air conditioning. And we did a simple recharge with our machine here, and quickly realized that the pressures were not ideal. I may have a couple of photos to stick in here. I tried to take a few along the way, but we noticed mainly the high side pressure was getting way out of control, which generally told us that there was a restriction in the system. And we'll cut to what Evan had to do twice now as he was helping me out with this car, is that the orifice tube was completely plugged with, we'll just call it debris.
It's an orifice tube. So it takes place of an expansion valve in the AC system. So this is what gives you that low pressure drop and actually makes the coolant or the refrigerant cool. This is the second one because there is still debris in the system. So this could indicate that the compressor is failing internally and sending debris through the system. And this screen on the orifice tube is capturing that debris. But we're going to throw another orifice tube in there and hopefully it'll work from there. We've cleared out all the debris, otherwise it's going to be needing a new compressor. What we have here, this is our original orifice tube right here, and as you can see, the screen got so clogged that it collapsed. And so we popped in another one, and we had good AC for a little while until this one clogged up once more. You can see the screen is clogged once again with debris. And then this is what it's supposed to look like even after the AC has been run. There's not supposed to be any debris in an AC system. So again, I think we might be looking at a slowly self-destructing AC compressor, but we'll see.
All right, so since you've seen that now, that we've had to put 2 orifice tubes in there for debris in the system, that led to our next problem we found with the air conditioning, is we still were having some trouble with the high side pressures. And generally, if your high side pressures are getting out of hand, that's generally going to be an airflow condenser issue, which led us to the front of the car where I told Evan to go ahead and try and see if the fins in the condenser were clear, and we quickly found that there was still a ton of mud clogged into the radiator condenser on this side, as well as every other radiator oil cooler on the car. So hopefully after 2-3 different rounds of orifice tubes, we've got a couple extra in case we need to do it a few more times to catch all that debris in the system, and we flushed all the radiators multiple times, so hopefully that will stay behaving itself. But once we've got through that, we moved on to some other issues, mainly the check engine light. So let's have a look at what we had to do with that. So unfortunately, even with our fancy Lamborghini scan tool, the code was very generic for the EVAP system, which is what the fault was. All it said is that the EVAP pressure sensor had a circuit fault. We'll put the code up in here. But we checked source voltage, which is a 5-volt signal, and everything seemed to be working there. But I had an aha moment when I realized that when we were filling this up while the engine was running, the fuel system had a vacuum on it, which is not normal. And Lamborghini, in its infinite wisdom, which was actually helpful in this case, provided 2 of everything pretty much for the EVAP system. So there's 2 vent valves that come from each throttle body. And what we found was one of those vent valves was stuck open, so it was always pulling vacuum on the EVAP system. And unfortunately, even though that part is relatively inexpensive, it is no longer available from Lamborghini. And I tried back sourcing it as a Siemens part, but couldn't find it. So what we ended up doing is basically turning it into one system. Instead of 2, we tied it into 1, so the one working vent valve would make the system operate properly. And I will say, so far so good. It has passed its EVAP test, and that is working properly, thank goodness. But besides the regular service and so forth, that was kind of all we had to do to the Gallardo. I mean, it stops, it goes, does what it's supposed to. We did flush the brake fluid and some gross, muddy clutch fluid that was still probably a little bit contaminated, which brought some feel back to the clutch. But let's go ahead and button this thing up, and we'll make sure the air conditioning is working for the 3rd stint, and hopefully get this thing back to Ed today. For this one, the safety goggles kept getting hit by the debris field, and that's no fun. The more I do, the worse it gets. There's a nice honey hole. So on our final checks, we realized that there was a bunch of oil on the bottom of the motor, and we were going back up top just to make sure our oil filter was looking good, because it is up in the valley of the engine. And this is what we came up with. This is all that was collected in the valley of the engine. So this is a mix of brake clean, oil, and muck. But we're trying to get that all clean so we can actually see if we have an issue here or if this is just residual oil. Because on a Gallardo, where the oil filter is located, there's no way to avoid spilling oil, unfortunately. So we have a feeling it was just collected down there with all this mud and gunk. So I only spent about 20 or 30 minutes between brake clean and pressurized air, shop air, to try and get this cleaned up. So we're going to do that, and then we'll run it and see if we still have any oil or if this was just residual being held on by a bunch of organic debris. So I'll finish cleaning up down here, and we'll start it up and see where we stand. So a couple other fun things we found is that there was a very stale, musty smell in the car, not only from Ed and I from our 900-mile road trip with no air conditioning, but you can see these cabin filters have kind of seen better days. I'm almost curious if these are the same ones that were in it during the flood, because they're pretty gross, and you can see they're kind of dry rotted. These are not fun to change in a Gallardo anyway, so they kind of get torn up on the way out. But pretty gross there. Maybe a little mold there, some exciting stuff. So it makes us feel a little better to breathe some somewhat fresh air through the fresh cabin filters. But also something super exciting on Gallardos, which it seems like they should get with every service. This is the oil filter cap, so they do have a cartridge oil filter. And it seems every one has a broken tab there. Hopefully you can see that in the camera. Well, that's just to retain the filter in there, because this is in a very difficult to reach spot in the Gallardo with the 5-liter, the early cars. But and that is because I think a lot of people try to pull out the oil filters instead of it's just like a 90-degree twist lock. But got a fresh one of those in there. Try to keep one on the shelf just for that reason. So the Gallardo is about to come off the lift here, so we figure before it does, I'm sure everyone begs the question of what does a flood car look like from underneath, and it's actually not too bad, so let's have a look. See, everything's in a nice tidy order. I'm sure it looked a lot worse when it was initially flooded, but thankfully this was a freshwater flood, so nothing is corroded or anything like that. You can see in there up against the knuckle and control arm and everything. Everything is a nice aluminum finish. Nothing corroded, like I said. There's no real remnants of mud either, other than, like I said, in the radiators and so forth, which we have cleaned multiple times. You can see it might have a little kind of a brown tinge there. But really, back in the engine bay and everything, it looks fabulous. It has a little bit of an oil leak, but nothing wild. But the funny thing about the Gallardos here is the service ports for the air conditioning are right off of the AC compressor on the side of the engine here. And another neat thing about Gallardos is both the AC compressor and the water pump are not run by a belt. You can see here they are run by like a kind of like a PTO shaft or something like that. You can see the one here and the one for the AC compressor there. The only thing that actually runs on a belt is the alternator, which lives right there with its own tensioner. So a little bit different from a Mercy, but the crankshaft side, or the crankshaft pulley side of the motor on a Mercy is on the back end, whereas on the Gallardo it's here on the front. So just a little bit of differences there, but everything is nice and tidy under here. All the suspension's in great shape, so I don't really worry about this one. Out here you can find some remnants. See if a cameraman can sneak in there. But we tried to blow out as much as we could see, but inevitably it will find its way into all the places. Like I said, this was flooded at least 4 years ago. I don't know the exact date, but as you saw, there is plenty still left, and there will be plenty more, I'm sure. So last thing left here, since we checked the oil level, is to see if it's ready for emissions. We've been kind of fighting with it to go through all of its readiness monitors. So last chance before it goes home and Ed can take over. And the verdict is still not ready. So it'll go back home to him, and hopefully with a few more miles, it will be good to go. Oil level is spot on. You can see there, you have to run it at 2,000-ish RPM for a minute. You can actually see it right here. It has to be between 70 and 90 degrees Celsius, 2,000 RPM for a minimum of 50 seconds, and then switch off and check within 1 minute. So we're perfect. pretty dry in there, so we'll start it up. Double check that we have no more leaks. So now for probably one of the best parts of servicing Lamborghinis. In order to check the oil temperature has to be pretty much scalding hot. So we're gonna go do one final check of the oil level on this one. So we'll go for a ride and get it warmed up, and then unfortunately it gets to go back home today. I will be sad to see this one leave, but hopefully it will hang around in Ed's fleet for a little while, and but hopefully it doesn't come for too many service visits. That's the idea, right? See our oil temperature there. Still got a little bit to go before it is correct for a check. So by the time we do our quick test drive loop, we should be in good shape. So here's the aftermath of the second flushing of the Gallardo radiators and oil coolers. Hopefully you can see all the silt there and sediment, and it is trailing all the way down. This is the one we flushed the most inside, the condenser. Still full of silt. 2 oil coolers. So now, cooling system and the air conditioning system should be working at its peak, like it should have. Alright, we got AC on full blast in the Gallardo. Wish y'all could be in here and feel what this is like, but we'll give you an idea with the temperature probe here. So we got 37 degrees. 36, 35, and on this 80-degree North Georgia day, this feels really nice. Just to have the humidity at least pulled out of the air. But hey, 35-degree vent temperatures, we won't complain about that either. So now we'll be able to top down and enjoy some sweet air conditioning in a gated Spider Gallardo. So that concludes this particular service visit with the Gallardo, as it is planning to go home in the morning. Kind of bittersweet. I will miss having it here. It is a lot of fun, but after all of the mud and guck and so forth, I will be happy to see it go home for a little while. But thank you all for watching, and we look forward to seeing you on the next video.